The humanitarian crisis in Europe continues as Hungarian police halt a train packed with migrants bound for the Austrian border. The long-awaited trial of Chad's former president is set to resume Monday. And the home of the future is here, and for a reasonable price. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. The European migrant crisis attracting global attention. Some of the images of refugees risking their lives and losing their lives are heartbreaking. All they want is a better life away from conflict and poverty. A chaotic scene played out Thursday in Hungary outside the Budapest train station. After waiting for 2 days, refugees and migrants were allowed to board, only to have their train stop just outside the city. In the first of two reports on the crisis, here's Reuters' Nathan Frondino.
Chaos and confusion break out in Budapest's Kaleti train station as officials attempt to end a standoff that has become the latest focal point of Europe's migrant crisis. When police opened the station, hundreds of refugees and migrants stormed a waiting train, cramming children through open doors and even open windows. They believed that they were finally being allowed to continue their journey west to Austria, Germany, and beyond, but they were wrong. Soon after it pulled away from the station, the train was stopped outside the city in Bicek. Police there ordered the passengers off, triggering yet more chaos as many tried to run away. While Hungary has a migrant reception center there, it's far short of the destinations these people fleeing war and poverty are hoping to reach.
Nobody's going to help us. They are total liars. They talk about the human rights. They talk about international laws. But what kind of international laws and human rights they have?
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban defended his country's handling of the crisis Thursday after meeting with EU leaders in Brussels.
We Hungarians are full of fear. People in Europe are full of fear because we see that the European leaders, among them the prime ministers, are not able to control the situation.
The 28-nation EU has been struggling for months to handle the more than 332,000 migrants who have fled conflict and poverty in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, the biggest stream of migrants into Europe since World War II. Germany, which is expecting to receive about 800,000 asylum seekers this year, has called on EU partners to share more of the burden.
You know, the problem is not a European problem. The problem is a German problem. Nobody would like to stay in Hungary. So we don't have difficulties with those who would like to stay in Hungary. Nobody would like to stay in Hungary, neither in Slovakia, nor Poland, nor Estonia. All of them would like to go to Germany.
The foreign ministers of Italy, France, and Germany signed a joint document Wednesday calling for, quote, a strong response to the crisis. The 28-member EU plans to hold emergency talks on the issue on September 14th. Richard Green, VOA News, Washington.
Well, for more insight on the crisis, Joel Millman, spokesperson, International Organization of Migration, joins me live via phone from Geneva. Joel, welcome to Africa 54.
I'm happy to be here. Can you see my picture okay?
Well, we are talking to you via phone, so I cannot see you. But nevertheless, it looks like things are only getting worse. First, Joel, can you give us a sense of how challenging it is when you have the mix of refugees and migrants? And what do people need to know?
We need to know that this crisis is reaching its peak.
As tragic as some of the images have been in the last 24 hours, we're fairly sure that there is beginning to be a consensus in Europe and pretty much across the world on how this should be dealt with. There's going to be some important meetings coming up in the next few days. People have really responded to the images and some of the news that's come out of Europe. It's a little strange because images just as awful were coming out of Africa for the last 2 years, but I think world public opinion is hardening around the idea that something really ambitious must be done to deal with a humanitarian emergency of this scale. And so on the whole, as tragic as the news has been, I think there's been a shift in this movement towards a settlement.
Now, we see the people, in fact, are not interested in staying in some of the countries where they first land, and yet there is an international law that requires that is where they seek asylum. How do you go about convincing these people that they cannot just proceed to the countries of their desire?
Well, that's one of the things that we see changing. A couple of countries have already said they think that rule should be waived, or they would like to work with the conditions where that rule is waived. If so, that would change the dynamic tremendously. If people will be able to reunite with their families and go to cities and where there's already an established community of their countrymen, which would take a burden off of the taxpayer of those states as well.
Now, Joel, how do you separate between the refugees who are running from war and migrants who might just be going to Europe to look for a better life?
It's hard to. I mean, this happens in humanitarian emergencies like this. I mean, this is kind of what goes with the territory. I mean, you know, when I started my career 40 years ago, there were people that were concerned that the large waves of Soviet Jews, or they were called the refuseniks in those days, resettled refugees from the Soviet Union, that KGB spies were mixed in among them. And certainly that was true. I mean, that's always an opportunity that intelligence agencies have. So, you know, it's going to happen this way too, but that doesn't change the nature of the emergency and the fact that we have to do things. All
right. Joel, thank you very much, and we hope to join you again next time on Skype. Joel Millman is the spokesperson for the International Organization of Migration. Now, Europe is facing mounting criticism over how it's handling its biggest migration crisis since World War II. But not all Europeans believe building walls or passing repressive policies are the answer. From the French port city of Calais, Elisa Bryant reports on a school for migrants that is opening doors and building bonds across nationalities.
French lessons at the Chemin des Dunes school. These students are learning terms for the weather, rain, wind, and snow, which many of these Sudanese and Eritreans will soon see for the first time. They're here to study art, Tai Chi, and especially French and English, languages that can help them apply for legal status in France or in Britain, just across the English Channel. Founder Zimeko Jones, a Nigerian migrant himself, says the school is also bringing together Calais' diverse migrant community.
Even though this morning maybe you saw this Kosovar from Kosovo, he come to school, he sit down with blacks, you know, from Sudan, sometimes Afghan, 2 Afghan, 3 Afghan. But for me, it's a pleasure for me to see them live together, you know, sit down together, unite together.
The school opened in July in this Calais migrant camp known as the Jungle. Today, classes are spilling over. Fuad from Sudan's western Darfur region arrived in Calais 4 months ago.
They will learn the school that when did you came here and how did you came here, the date of the departure and the date of the arrivée and quelle nationalité. Something like that. It's very, very good.
The school has a growing roster of volunteer teachers.
I often see people on the road, and so I wanted to meet them, to know where the way they were living here. The school is a way to restore humanity, and so it's a good thing.
Volunteers are also coming from Britain. Science teacher Neef McMahon from Kent crossed the channel by ferry with food, clothes and school supplies for the migrants.
I'm hoping that I can build links with the school that I work in and this school, and I think it would be really good to have young people, children, knowing what it's like for children their age living here. I'd really like to raise awareness.
Founder Zimeko Jones wants to establish another classroom just for women and children. The school is proof, he says, that migrants can create something positive in the jungle of Calais, and that Europe and its migrants can build a future together. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Calais, France.
Well, accounts of rape and sexual slavery during the war in Congo in the early 2000s dominated the second day of militia leader Bosco Ntaganda's trial at the Hague War Crimes Court on Thursday. Lawyers described the pain girls suffered as forced wives to senior officers. They also said that girls as young as 12 were abducted into Ntaganda's Union of Congolese Patriots and forced into sexual slavery. Bosco Ntaganda faces 18 charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity, in all including murder, rape, pillage and persecution, and a doctrine of international law that allows him to be charged personally with offenses committed by forces under his command. An estimated 5,000 civilians were killed during the 2002-2003 campaign led by the former military commander in the restive northeastern Congolese province of Ituri. Known as the Terminator during his time commanding the Patriotic Forces for the Liberation of Congo and indicted in 2006, Ntaganda remained on the run for years, fighting in a series of conflicts on and around Congo's border with Rwanda. In the town of Goma, memories of Ntaganda's reign of terror are still fresh for many residents.
We were suffering. Women were beaten and raped. Back home in Ruchuru, we were suffering a lot. We went to a displaced camp. We were rained on. So for me, when I hear that Bosco Ntaganda may go to jail, that is good news to me. It's about time.
We want to hear the truth from him. The courage that he showed by going to the ICC should not be in vain. We want to hear the whole truth. We want him to shed a light on the situation in Ituri. By doing that, he would help his country and help the victims if he speaks the truth.
I am happy that he's on trial, but I can give some explanations and ask why he's the only one facing trial. In my opinion, here in Congo, we have seen many crimes. It would be better to take in all of those who commit crimes here in Congo.
Lawyers for Bosco Ntaganda sought on Thursday to portray him as a professional soldier who had tried to protect civilians from chaos and disorder in Congo in the early 2000s. Born in Rwanda, Ntaganda grew up in Congo before fighting alongside Rwandan Tutsi rebels who seized control of the small Central African country, ending the 1994 genocide in which over 800,000 people died. Ntaganda then returned to Congo, where he took part in a series of rebellions and made a name for himself smuggling minerals. Well, the trial of former Chadian President Hissène Habré, which opened July 20th, but was postponed 2 days later to enable his court-appointed lawyers to prepare his defense, is resuming on September 7th in Senegal. Habré is accused of crimes against humanity, war crimes and torture between 1982 and 1990. But he insists the special tribunal set up for his trial is illegal. VOA's Mariama Diallo tells us more.
At the opening of his long-awaited trial in July, the former Chadian leader denied the legitimacy of the special court, the Extraordinary African Chambers. Shouting, "This is not a trial, this is a masquerade," as he was being ushered out of the court after a few of his supporters chanted, "Long live Habré." But Charles Diallo from the Florida International University College of Law said via Skype that Habré's argument cannot be sustained.
As a political argument, maybe he has an argument, but this is a court of law. It was properly constituted. It's an independent tribunal. The judges will be determining whether he is guilty or innocent based on the evidence before them, based on the case put forth by the prosecutors, and then also what the defense lawyers for Mr. Habré would argue in court.
The trial was adjourned when Habré's lawyers refused to appear in court, which then decided to appoint other lawyers to represent him. While imposing attorneys on a defendant who refuses to cooperate can be a danger for a court, Diallo says what's happening in Habré's case is not new.
We've heard this argument before. Former Liberian President Charles Taylor also said on the first day of his appearance at the special court, and I was sitting in the courtroom in the defense bench, and he said it is not recognizing the special court for Sierra Leone. It was also, he said, the political court. that was not properly constituted. We've seen the same arguments made by President Slobodan Milosevic, former Serbian president in the Yugoslav tribunal.
He says as a legal principle, a defendant is not entitled to hold justice hostage because the alleged victims also have a right to justice. Clément Abaifuta was a political prisoner during Abre's regime and now is president of the Association of Victims.
I was a gravedigger. That means every day of my prison life, I was burying victims who were my colleagues.
The trial marks the end of a 15-year battle to bring the former leader to justice in Senegal, where he fled and has lived in exile after being overthrown in a coup in 1990. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54 and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vincent Makori. Now, coming up, Yemen teeters on the brink of disaster as medical shortages soar. Stay with us.
I'm Milar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Welcome back. Now, aid agencies in Yemen say the country is on the brink of a humanitarian disaster, with up to 500,000 children facing severe malnutrition and hospitals running out of basic medicines. There are fears Yemen's civil war could escalate as the coalition led by Saudi Arabia tries to drive back Houthi rebels who seized control of much of the country earlier this year. And Ridgewell reports.
The Al Sabeen Hospital is a lifeline for children and pregnant women in Yemen's capital, Sana'a, but it's on the brink of collapse. The aid agency Save the Children provides support to the hospital. Its spokesperson, Mark Kay, has just returned from Sana'a, and he spoke to VOA via Skype from Jordan.
Before the crisis, it had a catchment population of about 300,000. But since the crisis, that number's risen to almost 3 million, with the entire governor reliant on it for specialist care when it comes to women who are pregnant or children who are in special need.
Managers say the hospital has entirely run out of some medicines, including intravenous fluids, anaesthetics, blood transfusion tests and Valium.
Almost half their staff have had to flee because of the violence. And they're running dangerously low on medicines. They currently use 1,000 litres of diesel a day to run the generators to keep the hospital running. But those supplies were due to run out imminently.
More than 500,000 children are expected to suffer severe malnutrition this year. Doctors at Sana'a's Al-Olfi clinic say the situation is critical.
We are facing famine with our children. We can't be patient with this. We call on the United Nations to look at the children who are innocent and shouldn't be experiencing malnutrition like this, the fear and the anxiety we are facing.
Aid agencies blame the acute shortages on the Saudi-led blockade and bombing of the Houthi-controlled port of Hodeidah. Up to 90% of hospital supplies were routed through the port. Again, Mark Kay.
So what we really need to see is the de facto blockade come to an end and unhindered access for these absolutely critical goods. Otherwise, more children and pregnant women will pay the price.
Aid agencies warn that across Yemen, around 15 million people lack access to basic health care, and that will likely prove the deadliest consequence of the conflict. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, it's time now for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudo with news about a new cancer blood test. Lino.
Hello, Vincent. Well, a study suggests a blood test may detect cancer relapse. Scientists at the Institute of Cancer Research in London followed 55 patients at a high risk of relapse because of the size of tumor. They analyzed the mutated DNA of the tumor and searched the blood for those mutations. 15 patients relapsed, and the blood test gave advanced warning of 12 of them, 8 months before doctors would normally have noticed. Experts say there is still some ways to go before a test could be used in hospitals. The study was published in Science Translational Medicine. This year, governments are set to agree on post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and a new global climate agreement. Observers say tackling climate change is an important aspect of improving human lives and could help in achieving the SDGs. They say change in climate affects directly and indirectly the physical, social, and psychological health of humans. The World Health Organization says extreme weather events are becoming more intense and frequent, such as the rise of sea levels. WHO says between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year from malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress. Joining us now live via Skype from Boston, Massachusetts, for more on the subject is Kate Dodson, Vice President of Global Health at the United Nations Foundation. Ms. Dodson, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Lenore.
So, as I mentioned earlier, climate change has an impact on people's health. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, you already mentioned one of the areas, extreme weather events, will, I think, according to WHO and a lot of other sources, have a dramatic impact on people's health and survival. You can think of things like natural disasters and hurricanes, but you can also think about things like extreme heat and drought, and those might exacerbate cardiovascular disease and respiratory disease, especially among vulnerable groups like the elderly and the young people. You also can see effects like the changing disease patterns, changes in what rainfall and temperature will change how disease patterns spread, or things like malaria and dengue fever.
So what does this suggest in terms of the way we move forward when it comes to addressing these issues, considering most of the idea with climate change is we don't have control over it?
Well, the reality is that we do have control over it, and there are lots of things that we as everyday citizens can do to help improve our climate and address these major issues of climate change. One is things like transportation efficiency, clean fuels, clean technologies that we can use in our own cars, and the way we get to work, the way we travel around will reduce fine particulate matter, and that will have a chance to improve air quality and human health. Another issue is clean cooking technologies. The use of dirty and inefficient cook stoves is a major cause of black carbon and also has a major impact on human health, leading to increased incidences of pneumonia. If we can improve our clean cooking technologies, choose more efficient, cleaner cook stoves, we both can address the black carbon issue and the climate issue and the human health issue.
So then quickly, when decision makers gather to address the climate change issue, what are we looking at in terms of some of the areas that we'll be focusing on?
I think energy efficiency and transport efficiency that I already mentioned, that's one major area in terms of mitigating the future effects of climate change. And that's one of the issues that will be looked at in Paris when the UN Convention, the parties of the UN Convention of Climate Change will meet and discuss. But they'll also be talking about issues of adaptation. How can we make sure that vulnerable areas have strategies that they need to adapt to changing air temperatures and rainfall patterns that could exacerbate things like drought. So they'll be looking at those issues as well.
Okay, Kate Dodson, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And that was Kate Dodson, Vice President of Global Health at the United Nations Foundation. And that's all we have for today's health report. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thanks a lot, Lenore. Be sure to watch for Lenore Mudu every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, how to control your entire home from a simple app. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Liberia, the World Health Organization announces for a second time that Liberia is free of the Ebola virus. In Uganda, the prominent opposition leader Kizza Besigye has entered next year's election race against veteran President Yoweri Museveni. In Libya, authorities in the capital Tripoli arrest more than 100 migrants who were traveling by boat. In Somalia, with rape cases rampant, a Taekwondo training center in Mogadishu has begun offering free classes to women. Finally, South Africans say they feel lucky and excited after an announcement that Durban will host the 2022 Commonwealth Games. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. From the living room to the palm of your hand. The super high resolution display known as 4K is the centerpiece feature of Sony's latest flagship smartphone. The company is seeking to grab a bigger slice of the market and has revealed big improvements to its Xperia Z5 range. There is a big focus on mobile photography and also comes with an improved motion stabilization for videos. Chinese company Huawei is doing the mobile phone one better. It says its device can be used as a scale to weigh objects. Well, next up, this may seem like something from a sci-fi film, but allowing your smartphone to adjust your thermostat, shower, even your coffee maker is Samsung's new SmartThings technology in full swing. Samsung says the new SmartThings starter kit will allow people to monitor, control, and secure their home from anywhere. That means tech fans can use the SmartThings hub to connect with smart sensors, lights, locks, and cameras all dotted around their home. The app is designed to work with Android, Windows, and iOS operating systems. The SmartThings starter kit is set to be released on September 10th in the UK and US. Well, and finally, the Spanish embassy in Canberra, Australia, aims to decorate its host city with art of a decidedly hip variety. Now, the embassy put the call out to Australian artists for its urban art competition. Melbourne painter Ron was chosen as the winner. His task was to turn a blank wall at the embassy into something of beauty, armed with some brushes, a roller, some paint, and a crane. The painting was completed in just a week. The end result, the portrait called Sarah. One embassy official described the work as like Spanish eyes watching over Australia. And that is what is trending today. And that's our show for today. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute, where we teach you all about idioms in American English. If you have ever heard American English, you may have heard this.
A day late and a dollar short.
What does this mean? Let's find out by listening to an American English conversation.
Hey, did you hear Steve was late to the birthday party and he forgot to bring a gift?
Yes, I did. He's always a day late and a dollar short to everything.
I know.
When people say a day late and a dollar short, they mean you are too late, unprepared, or disorganized. You only want to say this with your friends because it's an informal phrase. You don't want to use this in a formal or a business setting because it may be rude. Remember, a lot of American English is delivered by your facial expressions. And that's English in a Minute.